I'd say you were never broken. So if you feel like you have to break to belong, you're probably in the
Yeah.
wrong places. I'm trying to say that you don't have to break to belong. You already do belong. You're already perfectly enough and valid as you are. If people don't see that and value you, they're not your people.
Welcome to the Burnout Detox Kit podcast. I'm your host, Sophie Theen. I'm an award-winning people and culture executive, keynote speaker, coach, and the founder of the Burnout Detox Project. For more than a decade, I help companies build high-performing teams and cultures across fast-growing businesses. But behind the scenes, I was burning out over and over again. So I saw the side of success nobody talks about openly. So each week, I bring you raw conversations, expert insights that will help you navigate your toxic workplace and finally understand what success should never demand from you. So if you press play today, it means some part of you is ready for that to change. Welcome, and let's get into today's episode. Righty-ho. Well, welcome back to the show. Today, I'm joined by Ann Diment, who spent more than 2 decades working in health and safety before a complex PTSD and ADHD diagnosis changed the way she sees the world. Now, Ann is a coach and a poet who uses creativity to help herself and others heal. So I'm very excited for us to explore Ann's story today and to talk about how systemic issues, neurodivergence, and art intersect with burnout and resilience. So welcome to the show, Ann. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so grateful that you invited me.
Well, let's kick this off straight away. You spent 20 years in health and safety, as I said, before being diagnosed with complex PTSD and ADHD much later in life. Could you share a little bit about life and how it looked like before these diagnoses?
Yeah, it's interesting looking back now through these different lenses because the complex PTSD diagnosis came almost 15 years before I got my ADHD diagnosis, and I'm currently going through autism or ADHD identity change as well. So every time you get these labels, as you might like to call it, you have to understand your life before through a different lens. So looking back now, people used to comment about how busy I was and how much I got done. And it was like a badge of honor. But that was my survival. That was my hypervigilance. That was my not wanting to upset anyone because I experienced adverse childhood experiences. So from the age of 5 to the age of 18, multiple complex traumas. So it was complex PTSD I had the diagnosis for. And so you adapt, and it has an effect on your attachment style, how you interact with everyone in your life, and also about your view of yourself and self-worth. So I spent a long time not wanting to be a mother because I was terrified that I would repeat the same behaviours that I'd experienced because most of my trauma came from my mother. So that stopped me from having children until I was in my 30s. And I had to have hypnotherapy to help me deal with becoming a mother. So basically my life was pleasing everybody else, not wanting to upset anyone, staying safe. And I actually moved into health and safety because I didn't feel safe myself and I wanted to keep everyone else safe. So I was very good at my job because I was looking out for danger all the time.
And I know you also mentioned, speaking of motherhood, I remember you also mentioned burning out being a mum while trying to keep all the plates spinning. So I really resonated with your story when you said you were at a busy time of your life, but you couldn't really understand what was happening to you while you were navigating, the circumstances. So when did you realize there was only so much you can do before you kind of hit the wall?
Well, I'd had my first breakdown in my late 20s after I'd had a pregnancy loss, and that brought up a lot of the trauma and, about my own feelings about being a mother and my relationship with my mother. And my second pregnancy, there was a fair bit of trauma involved in that as well. And then obviously one child is great because you can get used to it. And then when the second child comes along, you think you know it all and you don't because every child's different. So balancing 2 different children and 2 different ages and still going back to work and doing all the things. Yeah, my coping capacity reduced. And again, another series of losses, grief triggered a lot of the old trauma because it involved me having to engage again with the person who'd abused me. So all of that just came to a head, bullying at work. Because I was doing my job so well, some of the management weren't very happy about me pointing out flaws in their management systems and health and safety. So they were kind of like doing things to make my life difficult. And because I identified so much with my job, most of my identity was around the job. And a lot of people get this, it's like, I am the job. And if the job isn't going well, then it reflects on my value and my self-worth, which is totally not true. But at the time, obviously, I felt that if my job wasn't going well, then I was failing somehow and trying to juggle all the things with the children. Yeah. And I just had a complete burnout, which took me off work for 9 months. I was out, I could not leave the house. I couldn't take my kids to school. I just couldn't function. My body and my brain just broke down. And I managed to get to see a doctor and got the complex PTSD diagnosis, and then got access to some therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. And it got me thinking about, are my thoughts and behaviours and actions actually healthy for me? And are they relevant to me now as an adult? Because obviously they developed when I was a child as a survival mechanism. So that started me on that path. I managed to get out of the house one day and pop over to my local library, and the local art club were doing a demonstration of just playing with watercolour paints. And I realised at that moment my brain was calm for the first time, and it had been in a long time, not ruminating. And while I was off work, the manager ramped up the pressure and turned my accusations of bullying into a disciplinary against me. So whilst I was off work, I
Wow.
was dealing with this horrific HR thing. So when I went back, occupational health, their advice to me said the stress and the triggers aren't going to go away because your manager's not going to change and you can't change them. So the only way you can change is to reduce your exposure to them by reducing your hours at work. And that was their
Wow.
solution. So because I'd joined this art club, I thought, actually, the best thing for me is to have one morning a week to do the art, and then that'll help me get through the rest of the week. So I took a pay cut and supported myself. And shortly afterwards, I got transferred to a different department, which is common in organisations. If they don't deal with the person bullying, they deal with the person who is being bullied, and they move them on or get rid of them. And that is something I really want to talk about, because I think that needs to change.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things that you talk about in one of the themes in your story is the tension between individual resilience and the systems we operate in. Exactly what you're saying here. When the system has decided to fail us, and as I also know, in part of your job is to implement stress management standards, either as a consultant or even you mentioned you've judged workplace safety awards as well. So let's take a moment and talk about these employers. What exactly are they doing wrong?
So I'll give you an example. So universities can have toxic cultures, and I was a equality and diversity rep. There was no
Otherwise, it's not official.
support.
It's not a real thing.
There was a disability committee for students because there was 50 people sitting on this one committee for supporting students, which I found ridiculous because no committee can function with 50 people in it. I mean, how do you get anything done? So I actually got the university to sign, there's an organisation called See Me, and a pledge to sort of say we need to start talking about mental health. I realised that we needed to have some form of support that wasn't HR, occupational health, because in lots of organisations, they aren't separate entities. They are sometimes connected, and that doesn't help. And that was working really well. But the people realised that actually it was opening up lots of cans of worms, and bullying was a very common issue. And guess what? They stopped it. So organisations might on the surface think, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. Actually, if a problem comes up, how are you addressing that? It costs more to recruit people and retain than it does to retain them. So why don't you just treat people well, and they won't leave, and they'll actually do better work for you. They feel valued.
Yeah. And obviously, you're absolutely right that employers need to do more and do better for employees. But at the same time, there's also this common pattern that I have seen in employers where they literally tell the very people or the individuals who raise concerns or maybe not feeling as the company is supporting them as adequately as possible to literally fix themselves, because we know that this isn't enough when the environment itself or the system itself is toxic.
Yes, resilience is sometimes abused. When the International Standard on Psychological Safety at Work was published quite a while ago now, the representative for the Health and Safety Executive who had been on that panel shared this brilliant analogy, and he said, if one fish in the pond is getting sick, you treat the fish. If many fish in the pond are getting sick, it's not the fish that are a problem, it's the pond. If multiple people are experiencing stress-related illness, burnout, or, leaving the company because they're not being treated well, then they need to think about how they are doing things wrong and what they need to do. And a lot of that comes from feedback from staff. What I've learned from my own experiences and from the work I've been doing training NHS staff to have personalised health conversation skills is we're all unique individuals with unique past experiences, with unique present life circumstances, and we're all operating at different levels. All those things can impact your ability to cope at work. So making it personalised support is really important.
I bet. I bet. Now, let's come back and talk about neurodivergence in the workplace. Early diagnosis seems to be a game changer. What's your take on it, since you've only had to find out much later in life?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's only in the last 19 years or 18, 19 years that we've been allowed to be diagnosed as adults. So, the NHS in England, and it's 2000, I always get this date wrong. I think it was 2008 that they actually recognised in England that adults, we didn't grow out of it. If you had ADHD or autism as a child, you didn't grow out of it because it's a neurodevelopmental condition. It's to do with how your brain grows and develops. Yes, you can manage the symptoms of ADHD and live a little bit better, but it's not something you cure. There's a lot of grief that comes with diagnosis later in life, and that's what I find in my clients. It's not the impact of the ADHD, it's the grief. And it's only since I've been getting support and understanding myself better and not masking so much my ADHD and feeling safe to say, I need this support, or I need to do this, or I can't do this. And I've noticed in the last few months a calm and an acceptance that I've never felt at all. I'm grateful for that. So it's not
Yeah.
just the impact of you at work, it's every aspect of your life.
And coming back to just workplaces, what do you wish workplaces knew in terms of supporting people who don't just necessarily fit the 9-to-5 model?
Well, the 9-to-5 model was essentially generated to churn out factory workers for the Industrial Revolution, and we're not factory workers anymore, are we? Why does it have to be 9-to-5? I would caveat that with saying that if we're talking about burnout, having boundaried work time is really important.
Fair enough.
One of the questions I asked when I was doing the judging was, how do you implement the management standards? I don't say for stress, because they should know that they're called the management standards of stress. They've been around for 20 odd years. But I was so impressed by one finalist that actually won the award a few years back. They were I won't name them here, but they were a large cosmetics company operating in Brazil. So I asked them, well, with all this going on, how did your management team protect yourselves and deal with the extra stress and avoid burnout? And they said, well, we did the same as we always do. No meetings on Fridays, because it's important to have family time at the weekends. And I thought, wow, if they could do that in the midst of that really high pressure environment, that is a model for any company. Why can't you have boundary time? And I know in some countries they do have laws now where you're not allowed to
Of
send
course.
emails after a certain time. So things like that are really important.
Yeah.
Being flexible and individual in terms of support, but also being boundaried as well.
Yeah, absolutely. In Australia, we now have the new rule around your ability to switch off. So your right to switch off. Basically, it means that employees now have the option to say no to work after hours.
My goodness, that's amazing.
It feels revolutionary, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot happening in Australia, because I visited last year. I went out there to train with Dr. Peter Stapleton and to do some advanced trauma EFT training. And I know they've been making great strides in getting general practitioners to be able to diagnose ADHD out there.
That's right.
And because I took part in the ADHD Global Summit and heard them talk about that, but also they're doing great strides in domestic abuse support and all those things as well. It's like they seem to be very forward thinking in that sense.
Yeah, it is. It has definitely made it a lot more accessible. You can already request for a diagnosis with your GP, which is actually very, very accessible.
Yeah, that's great. I think of myself as being relatively lucky that I only had to wait 9 months for my ADHD assessment, because in England we had the right to choose. But as I'm an ADHD UK ambassador and an ambassador to UK Parliament now, and we're hearing is that because of the funding situation and the way it's been effectively farmed out to private assessment companies a lot of the time now, because there's no training or capacity in the NHS to cope with the amount of people who, after adults were able to be diagnosed, were seeking it, and even young people,
Mm-hmm.
they're going through
Of
their whole
course.
school career without being able to be diagnosed. People are being blocked from accessing support because they don't have that diagnosis. And the wait list in some areas, it's like a postcode lottery. The wait list can be decades.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely unacceptable that people have to wait to get that support that they need, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't we switch gears and talk about something deeply personal to you? And I think everyone listening will love it too. You wrote a very powerful poem called You Don't Know Me after your diagnosis. I believe this was your ADHD diagnosis.
Yeah.
And you performed it, and it became a turning point for you to reclaim your voice. Now, I cannot tell you enough how much I love hearing you say that that was a pivot moment for you to
Yeah.
reclaim your voice. What really touched me at that time was the fact you also said for a long, long time before you found your own voice, you had been singing someone else's words for years.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that, and how do you feel about reading the poem to us?
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah, I'd love to. I've been supporting people through Words for Wellbeing workshops, and I recently ran some workshops for women to share their birth stories, the experience of their births through poetry, and having that opportunity to express through poetry is such a healing.
Yeah, amazing. Well, how do you feel about reading it to us?
Oh, gosh. Okay, yes, it's here. I've got it here. You don't know me, so who are you to judge your arrogance and ignorance in saying I'm too much when peeking out from behind the mask I used to keep me safe? If I dare to show my feelings, you tell me to my face, stop making a fuss, too emotional, just nuts, too sensitive, lighten up. Well, goodbye. Your time is up. I'm tired of the gaslighting when I challenge the status quo, telling me there's nothing wrong. Well, the cracks are starting to show. If I call you out, I'm argumentative, causing a fuss. Calm down. Well, this isn't how I want to live. Please let me out before I drown. I'm learning to swim, not sink, you see. Understanding my brain works differently. The shame and the fear and the guilt are gone. If you don't like the real me, well, it's time to move on. Stop making a fuss, too emotional, just nuts, too sensitive, line up. Well, goodbye, your time is up. Too many years of my life have been lost, thinking I'm broken, pressed at what cost? Decades of suffering, feeling anxious and low, not understanding why. Oh, to fit in. So stop making a fuss, too emotional, just nuts, too sensitive, lighten up. Well, goodbye, your time is up. It's time to unmask and find my safety with people who understand what it means to be me. But friendship is difficult with a brain wired like mine. It creates heartbreak and loneliness time after time. When the differences get noticed, you just don't fit in. 1 minute a friend, next consigned to the bin. Stop making a fuss, too emotional, just nuts, too sensitive, lighten up. Well, goodbye. Your time is up. Rejection, sensitivity, hormonal events, PTSD and depression conspire to prevent close friendships to form or survive for too long, as being let down so often just feels so wrong. Stop making a fuss, too emotional, just nuts, too sensitive, lighten up. Well, goodbye. Your time is up. So I learned self-reliance. Don't depend on anyone. Focus on special interests, the stuff I do for fun, to regulate my nervous system, create calming flow, to make up for the wiring differences that we now know reduce the happy hormones I can naturally produce and affect emotional regulation that make me feel no use. So I'm making a fuss. Being emotional takes guts. I'm sensitive. Great friend, no longer codependent, stopped seeking validation outside of me, accepting I have happiness inside, you see. I'm learning to stand up and love all of me, unmasking and proud to be ADHD.
Oh, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with all of us.
Thank you for letting me read it. Every time I read it, something else just sticks out to me. So sometimes you write these things, you don't realize till a few years later how much
Mm,
you're releasing, so it's really good, and that's why I love helping other people to write as well, and hearing other people's writing, because there's always something that touches you.
yeah, definitely. It's like reading your favorite book over and over again, but in different seasons as it brings different meanings.
Yeah, and I think I didn't mention earlier, but one of the things that changed, I mentioned that I went to the art group, And that changed my life because I started being an artist. And a few years later, we'd had to move to be carers. So whole life moved from Scotland back down to England. And I was running around burning out again, being a health and safety consultant. And I got a call one day where basically my work had been cancelled by somebody who'd made a decision in this corporate that I didn't need my services anymore. And I sat there and I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? What brings me joy? What actually fills my cup? And I went back to creativity and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to take a grown-up gap year. So in 2019, I quit my job, quit my business, admin job, supporting a school, governance board, taking minutes, and went to art college. That's what got me writing poetry properly. 2 years of just unpacking, trying all different forms of creativity. And there was a poem called Forget the Past by a poet called Steve Taylor. He's a psychologist. I don't know if you've heard of him. And
No.
something that really resonated with me, if you don't mind me sharing now, one of them is that the past is only a tale you keep dragging behind you, collecting dust and dirt until it's so heavy with bitterness and regret it stops you moving forward. And the one thing that really stuck with me was there is no past, there are only memories of events, and every memory is refracted through a hall of mental mirrors until whatever once was true dissipates and disappears like vapor trails fading in the sky. And it got me thinking that all the stuff, the programming that I've been operating from my past, because of my past, I'm choosing to keep it. I'm choosing how I retell that story every time. And the poetry and the art can actually help me we call it reauthoring your life. It can help you retell that story in a way that you want to. And that was really resonant for me. And so basically the final bit of it was so cut the tail and cut the tail. Cut the tail as in the end tail and cut the tail. Turn the mental projector off. Don't strain your eyes trying to see through the fog when the panorama of the present stretches clear and bright around you. And that gave me so much hope. And I wrote a poem in response to that. And that's what started me on my poetry journey, basically.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
Yes.
Well, to wrap our session up, what would be your one piece of golden advice? I don't really want to call it a survivor hack, but for listeners who might be feeling quite broken by the system and they don't feel like they believe in themselves right now.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this one. Brené Brown's influenced me a lot in this term because it goes back to, it's a lot about your ADHD. And I'd say you aren't broken. You were never broken. You were breaking yourself to fit in wherever you were fitting in. So think about why you want to be in those spaces and the people in those spaces, because are they the people that actually are your people? So if you feel like you have to break to belong, you're probably in the wrong places. And that's it's not a very quotable thing, but I'm trying to say that you don't have to break to belong. You already do belong. You're already perfectly enough and valid as you are. If people don't see that and value you, they're not your people.
Well said. I cannot say that any better than what you've said. That's it for today's episode. So how can people find more information about you, Anne, and reach out if they have any questions or basically just want to say hello?
Yes, I am Resilience Rebel. So I'm at Resilience Rebel on Instagram. I'm over on LinkedIn as Ann Diment Changemaker. And my website is resiliencerebel.com. And I offer ADHD coaching, emotional freedom technique, and therapeutic coaching sessions, and of corporate consultancy to help you be more inclusive in your well-being and stop your people from breaking.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Anne, and we really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing, obviously, your personal experiences and especially reading out your incredible poem to us. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Sophie. It's been lovely to talk to you. And I've been listening to podcasts and I've been loving the episodes. So yeah, you've been having some really great conversations. So thank you for including me in that too.
Thank you. Okay. If this episode resonated with you today, make sure to follow and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a conversation as important as this. The Burnout Detox Kit is here to make sure ambitious people like you recover from the burnout without losing themselves in the process. So if you know someone navigating burnout right now, workplace toxicity, even simply trying to hold it all together, share this episode with them. You never know who might need to hear it. I thank you for your courage today and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode.